Mr. Secretary, when was the last time you told the American people the truth? The room went dead silent. Cameras zoomed in on Denzel Washington, sitting not as an actor today, but as a citizen invited to testify at the Senate Committee on Economic Accountability. Across from him sat Trump's Treasury Secretary, shoulders squared, a smug half-smile on his face, like this was going to be just another routine hearing. It wasn't. The first 30 seconds were electric. Denzel's tone was calm but carried the weight of a hammer about to drop. Viewers watching the live stream leaned forward, sensing something rare, a Hollywood icon who wasn't here to promote a movie, but to challenge power, directly, and without a script. You've overseen policies that drove working families to the brink while billionaires popped champagne, Denzel continued, eyes locked on the man across the table. Do you even understand what happens when a mother can't afford groceries, when a veteran chooses between rent and medication? Or do you only read numbers on a spreadsheet? The Treasury Secretary's smile faltered. He leaned toward the microphone, trying to gather a polished response, but Denzel didn't let him breathe. You signed off on tax cuts for the rich, then called it job creation. Where are those jobs? Where's that creation? I'll tell you where it is, sitting in offshore accounts while my people are still waiting for a fair shot in the country they bled for. Murmurs filled the chamber. Even some senators shifted in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a dismantling, brick by brick, of an official's carefully built image. This isn't Hollywood, sir, Denzel said, his voice now rising. This is the United States Senate, and I'm asking you one simple thing: account for what you've done. The Treasury Secretary swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he wasn't the most powerful man in the room. The Treasury Secretary shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Mr. Washington, with all due respect. Denzel leaned forward, cutting him off with surgical precision. Respect? Respect is earned. And right now, you're sitting in that chair because millions of people believed you'd protect their interests. Instead, you protected your friends. The words hit like body blows. The committee room felt tighter, as if the oxygen had been sucked out. The C-SPAN cameras caught every twitch in the secretary's jaw. He tried to deflect, speaking in measured tones about economic growth and market stability, but Denzel didn't blink. Economic growth for who? Denzel pressed, his voice now sharp enough to slice through the scripted talking points. You brag about the stock market while people in my neighborhood are working 2 jobs and still can't pay rent. You talk about stability while entire communities are collapsing under debt. A senator attempted to interject. Mr. Washington, let's allow, but Denzel raised a hand. With all due respect, Senator, the American people didn't invite me here to be polite. They invited me here to get answers they've been denied for years. Gasps rippled across the room. The secretary opened a folder, flipping through papers like a drowning man searching for a life raft. Denzel didn't give him one. Tell me, Denzel continued, leaning even closer to the mic, how much of the taxpayer money you promised for small businesses during the crisis actually went to Wall Street firms? Don't look at your papers. Look at me. The secretary hesitated, then muttered something about allocation challenges. That was it, the breaking point. Allocation challenges? Denzel repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. That's what you call it when communities are starved while billionaires get bonuses? No, sir. I call that theft. A sharp murmur erupted from the gallery. Staffers whispered to each other, and even the stenographer's fingers seemed to pause for a split second. This isn't a movie, Denzel said, his tone lowering but intensifying. You don't get to yell, cut, when the truth gets uncomfortable. By now, the secretary was gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles turned white. And Denzel? He was just getting started. Denzel slid a thick folder across the table, the sound of it thudding on the wood echoing in the silent chamber. This, he said, tapping the cover with a deliberate hand, isn't a script. These are your numbers. And they tell a story you've been trying very hard to hide. The Treasury Secretary glanced at the folder, then back at Denzel, his face tight. Mr. Washington, I'm not sure this is an appropriate forum. Oh, it's the perfect forum, Denzel interrupted. Because this isn't happening behind closed doors. This is public. This is on record, and the people watching at home deserve to see it. He opened the folder and flipped to a page marked in bold red ink. Page 14, internal memos showing that out of the $500 billion in so-called relief funding, less than 8% reached actual small businesses. The rest? He turned another page with a snap. Funneled to corporations that paid out executive bonuses during the same quarter. The secretary shifted in his seat. Those were strategic investments to stabilize. Strategic investments? Denzel's voice cut like glass. You call it strategic when a black-owned barbershop in Detroit shuts down forever, but a hedge fund in Manhattan gets a taxpayer-funded lifeline? You call that strategy? I call that betrayal. The air in the room felt electric. Even the senators who normally played it safe were leaning forward, sensing the tension climb. Denzel held up a sheet of paper. Here's a list of 23 companies that received over $50 million each. And here, he pointed to another page, is the number of employees they laid off within weeks. Thousands. Gone. And you sat there and signed off on it. The secretary opened his mouth, but Denzel's hand came down on the table, the sound sharp enough to make people in the back row flinch. Don't give me another speech about market forces. I've been on film sets for 40 years, I know acting when I see it. And right now, you're giving the performance of your life. The room broke into muffled reactions, gasps, low murmurs, the clicking of cameras from the press row. The secretary's eyes darted to the committee chair as if silently begging for rescue, but the chair didn't step in. This isn't about me embarrassing you, Denzel said, leaning closer to the mic, it's about you explaining to millions of Americans why you chose Wall Street over Main Street. By now, the secretary's pen was motionless, his prepared notes forgotten. And Denzel? He wasn't just winning the exchange, he was dismantling the man's credibility piece by piece. The chair recognized Denzel again, and the camera zoomed in as he leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze fixed like a laser. Mr. Secretary, let's make this real simple. How many of the companies you bailed out were major campaign donors to this administration? The secretary hesitated, his lips parting but no words coming out. I'll help you, Denzel said, flipping another page in his folder. 17 corporations, all on record as having donated millions. And you want to sit here and tell America this was just economic policy? No, sir. This was payback. And everyone in this room knows it. A murmur swept through the chamber, but Denzel didn't slow down. His voice sharpened. You took an oath to serve the American people, not to write checks to your friends. And when you did it, you didn't just fail at your job, you sold out the trust of an entire nation. The secretary tried to steady himself. With all due respect, Mr. Washington, you're not an economist. These decisions. Denzel cut in, his tone steady but ice-cold. I may not be an economist, but I know what theft looks like. I know what corruption smells like. And right now, the stench in this room is unbearable. A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere behind the cameras. Staffers shifted uncomfortably. One senator leaned back with a smirk, as if silently enjoying the dismantling. Denzel slid a photograph across the table. This is Mrs. Alvarez. She ran a diner in Texas for 32 years. Pandemic hit, she applied for relief 3 times. Denied. Meanwhile, one of your strategic partners got $25 million and used it to buy back stock. Explain that to her. Explain to the faces of every working American who lost everything while your friends got richer. The secretary picked up the photo, his hands visibly trembling now. I'm not familiar with the specifics of. That's the problem. Denzel's voice thundered, cutting him off completely. You're not familiar because you never bothered to know. You sit in this high office, insulated by numbers and memos, while the people you swore to serve are fighting to keep the lights on. The atmosphere was electric. Journalists were typing furiously, cameras clicking non-stop. Denzel's every word was hitting like a hammer. "You can spin statistics all day," Denzel said, leaning back now, "but numbers don't bury loved ones, and they don't close family businesses. That's on you. And history will remember it." The secretary swallowed hard, his composure cracking. He wasn't just losing this hearing, he was losing the room. The tension in the Senate chamber was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Every camera in the room stayed locked on Denzel, waiting for his next move. He didn't rush. He let the silence linger, the kind that makes people shift in their seats and swallow hard. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, but carrying to the farthest corner, he said, "Do you know why I'm here today, Mr. Secretary?" The secretary blinked, unsure how to answer. "I'm here," Denzel continued, "because I am tired of watching powerful men act like America is their personal ATM. I am tired of watching public service turn into self-service. And I am tired of watching the working people of this country get lied to while billionaires get richer off their pain." Gasps rippled through the gallery. A few senators on the panel froze mid-note, their pens dangling in the air. Denzel slowly pulled another document from his folder and slid it forward. "This is a memo, signed by you, instructing relief funds to be redirected to priority recipients. And these recipients just so happen to be tied to private equity firms where you hold investments. Coincidence?" The secretary's face turned a shade paler. "That's classified." "No," Denzel shot back instantly, his voice now like a whip crack. "That's theft, and the only thing classified here is your conscience." The chamber erupted. Some senators shook their heads in disbelief, while others leaned forward with predatory smiles. The secretary shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. Denzel didn't let up. "You want to talk about respect for the office? Respect isn't earned by hiding behind paperwork. Respect is earned by looking people in the eye and telling them the truth, even when it costs you. But you've turned public trust into personal profit." He pointed toward the public gallery. "Every person up there pays your salary. They trusted you to protect them in a crisis. And you used that crisis to line pockets, yours included." The secretary opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Denzel leaned back, his voice steady but final. "I don't need an economics degree to see corruption when it's sitting right in front of me. The difference between you and me, Mr. Secretary? I answer to the people. You answer to your wallet." For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then, a wave of murmurs and clicks from cameras filled the space, every journalist sensing this was the quote that would dominate headlines. The secretary's lips tightened, his eyes darting between his notes and the cameras. He seemed to search for an escape, but the chamber was a trap of his own making. Denzel didn't give him time to recover. He leaned forward again, lowering his voice just enough so that the microphones caught every syllable. "And while we're talking about accountability, should we bring up the meeting at Mar-a-Lago?" The secretary's eyes widened instantly. A ripple went through the room. One senator dropped his pen, another muttered, "Oh, no," under his breath. Denzel flipped open a fresh folder and slid out a single glossy photograph, the kind that changes careers. It showed the secretary seated at a private table with Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, and two men known for running offshore tax shelters. "You told this committee you had no contact with the former president about federal relief disbursements," Denzel said, his tone like steel. "But this picture says otherwise. And this meeting happened the night before a $400 million allocation mysteriously shifted to companies tied to Trump's inner circle." "Care to explain?" The secretary stammered. That was just a dinner." "A dinner?" Denzel cut in sharply. "Tell that to the small businesses in Detroit that never saw a penny of relief. Tell it to the veterans' hospitals still waiting for upgrades you promised. You were supposed to serve the people. Instead, you served champagne to billionaires while America starved." The gallery erupted in murmurs, flashes from cameras painting the room in bursts of white. Even the senators who usually avoided eye contact with Denzel were now openly leaning forward, waiting for the knockout blow. Denzel took a long breath, then delivered it. This isn't just about numbers on a ledger. This is about a country's soul. And right now, you, and your friends, are selling it piece by piece. I don't care if your last name is Trump, Kennedy, or Rockefeller, the truth will find you. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a single voice shouted, "Tell it, Denzel," and the chamber broke into applause, an almost unheard-of breach of Senate protocol. The secretary sat frozen, his career unraveling under the relentless spotlight. Denzel, unmoved, leaned back in his chair and simply said, "Your move, Mr. Secretary." By the next morning, the clip of Denzel's takedown was everywhere, played on cable news, reposted on social media, dissected by late-night hosts. But it wasn't until Donald Trump himself called into a conservative talk show that the tension exploded even further. "They've got this Hollywood guy acting like some kind of prosecutor," Trump's voice boomed through the radio waves. "Denzel Washington is a washed-up actor looking for relevance, and now he's lying about my people. It's disgraceful. Total witch hunt." Within minutes, Denzel was booked on a major morning news program. The anchor didn't even have to prompt him. "Mr. Washington, you've heard the former president's remarks. Care to respond?" Denzel adjusted his tie, locked his gaze on the camera, and fired back. "Let me be clear, this isn't Hollywood. This is real life. And if Mr. Trump thinks pointing out corruption is a witch hunt, maybe he's afraid of the truth catching him." The anchor raised an eyebrow. "So you stand by your claims about the Treasury Secretary?" "I stand by the facts," Denzel said firmly. "I don't care if it's a secretary, a senator, or a former president. If you're stealing from the American people, you're going to hear from me. And you can call me any name you want, I've been called worse, but you will not intimidate me into silence." Back in the radio studio, Trump's team scrambled to push back, flooding social media with posts attacking Denzel's credibility. But the public reaction was electric. Hashtags like #DenzelForTruth and #TellItDenzel began trending nationwide. Outside the Senate building, protesters gathered holding up blown-up prints of the Mar-a-Lago photo. Chants of "Where's the money?" echoed through the streets. For the first time in years, the focus wasn't on Trump's insults, it was on the evidence. And behind closed doors, sources whispered that more documents were about to leak. If what Denzel hinted at was true, the photograph was just the opening shot in a war that could bring down more than one political giant. The hearing room was packed tighter than it had been all morning, the air tense enough to feel like static clinging to the skin. Cameras zoomed in, microphones caught every breath, and the Treasury Secretary's eyes darted like someone trying to find an exit in a windowless room. Denzel sat forward in his chair, fingers drumming lightly on the polished wood in front of him, not impatient, but deliberate, like he was counting down. The chairman recognized him. "Mr. Washington, you have the floor." Denzel didn't waste time. He reached into the leather folder by his side, pulled out a thick, stapled document, and laid it flat for everyone to see. The sound of the papers hitting the desk wasn't loud, but in that silence, it was a gunshot. "Madam Secretary," he began, voice even but razor-sharp, "do you recognize this?" He slid the document across the table toward her. She glanced down, eyes flicking over the header. The color drained from her face. Where did you get this?" Denzel leaned back, almost smiling. "Public record. Funny how public records stay hidden until someone who actually cares enough to look finds them." The committee murmured, reporters' pens scratched furiously against their notepads. One camera operator zoomed in on the bold, stamped words, "Internal, not for release." "This," Denzel continued, "is a memo from your department, signed by you, greenlighting the transfer of $1.4 billion in relief funds to private contractors with zero oversight. And not just any contractors. Companies tied directly to political donors. Now, you've sat here for hours talking about fiscal responsibility and transparency. Care to explain why this never made it into your prepared statement?" The secretary swallowed, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "That's a gross mischaracterization." "No," Denzel cut in, voice suddenly booming through the chamber. It's called evidence. And unlike your talking points, this doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off. A ripple of reaction surged through the room, gasps, whispers, the quick shutter bursts of photographers catching her every blink. Across the dais, one senator muttered under his breath, "Oh, she's done." The secretary glanced toward her aides, desperate for a lifeline, but they stared back at her, frozen. Denzel leaned forward again, his eyes locking on hers. "You've got two options," he said quietly enough for the mics to lean in but loud enough for the audience to feel the edge in his voice. "You can explain this now, under oath, or you can explain it later, under subpoena." The pause that followed wasn't just silence, it was a countdown, and everyone in the room knew it. The moment Denzel's words hit the air, the Senate chamber wasn't just a room, it was a live grenade. The Treasury Secretary froze mid-breath, her eyes darting again toward the chairman, then toward the cameras, as if realizing too late that there was no escape route here. Somewhere in the back, a reporter whispered, "That's the clip," already imagining it headlining the evening news. The camera crews seemed to sense it too, lenses focused, mics extended, capturing every flicker of discomfort on her face. Denzel didn't move. His stillness was a weapon, the kind that forces the other person to fill the silence. But the secretary didn't speak, she just shifted in her chair, the leather creaking under her weight, her hand clutching a pen that trembled ever so slightly. The chairman cleared his throat, perhaps hoping to break the tension, but Denzel's voice cut through first. "See, this is the part one don't understand. You've got time to sign billion-dollar authorizations, but no time to tell the American people where their money went. Help me reconcile that." A nervous laugh escaped the secretary, the kind that sounds more like surrender than confidence. "You're twisting the—" "I'm reading," Denzel interrupted, holding up the document so the cameras could zoom in. "I'm literally reading your words. The only thing twisted here is the truth you've been selling." In the press row, phones lit up as journalists started posting live updates. Within minutes, hashtags began flooding Twitter, hashtag Denzel drops the hammer, hashtag Treasury scandal, hashtag receipts in hand. The secretary's PR aide leaned over to whisper something, but she brushed him off with a tight shake of her head. Every move she made was now magnified, by the cameras, by the crowd, by the millions already watching from their living rooms. "Here's the thing," Denzel said, leaning in just enough for his words to feel personal. "You can dodge me all day, but you can't dodge the people who put you in that chair. They're watching. And they're taking notes." Gasps rippled through the audience. The secretary's lips parted, but no words came. She knew anything she said now could, and would, be used against her. By the time the chairman reluctantly called for a recess, the damage was done. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed, microphones jostling for position, each one firing off the same question: "Secretary, did Denzel just end your career?" On TikTok, the clip of Denzel slamming down the document had already hit 1.2 million views, and it had only been 14 minutes. By the next morning, the hearing had already crossed from political theater into full-blown cultural moment. Every news network led with the same image: Denzel, frozen mid-slam, the Treasury Secretary recoiling like she'd just been hit by a truth bomb. CNN ran the headline, "Washington to Washington, where's the money?" Fox News, trying to spin it, went with, "Actor hijack Senate hearing," but the clip they played still made the secretary look like she was melting under the lights. On Twitter, Denzel's name was trending above the president's. On Instagram, the slow-motion clip of his document slam had been set to rap beats, orchestral strings, even WWE entrance music. Memes flooded TikTok. One had him edited into a courtroom scene from A Few Good Men, shouting, "You can't handle the truth." When reporters caught up with Denzel outside a coffee shop in D.C., they expected him to bask in the viral glow. Instead, he just took a slow sip from his cup, then said, "If going viral is what it takes for them to answer where the money went, then by all means, share away." The Treasury Department released a vague, two-paragraph statement about ongoing reviews and maintaining transparency. It was the kind of bureaucratic fog that says everything and nothing at the same time. But by now, the public wasn't having it. The comments section under the statement was brutal, full of people quoting Denzel's lines back at them word for word. Late-night hosts tried to joke about it, but even they knew this wasn't just another celebrity soundbite. One analyst on MSNBC put it bluntly, Denzel didn't just embarrass the secretary, he exposed a hole in the administration's credibility you could drive a truck through. By the weekend, petitions were circulating demanding a formal audit. And in living rooms, barbershops, and coffee counters across the country, people weren't talking about the latest movie release. They were talking about Denzel Washington in the Senate, how an actor had asked the one question no politician seemed willing to answer, and how, for a few minutes on live TV, the truth had actually been louder than the lies. Denzel, for his part, didn't post a word about it online. But his silence was louder than any tweet. You can hide the paper, you can hide the numbers, but you can't hide the truth. Not from me. Not from the people. This isn't Hollywood, this isn't a movie, this is our money. And we want answers, now.